Good evening all, and welcome. I'm sure many of us think back to field trips with fond memories. However, not all field trips can be as pleasant. I hope you're ready, because it's time to get comfortable and let the darkness take control. This story happened a year ago, when I was 15 and on a school trip in San Fran. At the time, I was very immature. Not in the sense you'd normally think, but in the sense that I didn't really know how the world worked and how scary it could be. I attribute this story, and a few other scary things that happened in the past year, to me growing up and realizing how the world really works. I was roaming with two other girls in my room, both who were a year older than me, so I didn't really know them well. The way our trip worked, so to say, was that breakfast in the hotel was between 7 and 8, but the chaperones on the trip wouldn't wake us up, so if we wanted to have time to get ready/eat before we left to go explore the city for the day, we had to do it on our own. This meant that in the morning, me and the people in my room didn't see the chaperones till we all went down for breakfast, usually around 7:45, since we all took a long time to get ready. However, this day was different. We were tired of arriving late and having to eat quickly, so we woke up a bit earlier to go down for breakfast right when it opened. We ate breakfast with pretty much the rest of the kids on my trip, and all headed to the elevator together. This was a mixed boys/girls trip, and my twin brother also happened to be on the trip, so the people in the elevator were him and his friends, me and the girls from my room, and a few of their friends. The elevator door was almost closed when two Indian men stuck their hand through the door and stepped inside, squeezing themselves into an already packed elevator. They looked young, maybe 19 to 20. Eventually we arrived at our floor and all got off. So did the men. The way the hotel rooms and hallways were situated was essentially just a square. You could go anywhere around the floor and eventually make it back to the elevator if you turned left/right 3 times. The people on my trip went right and the men went left. Eventually my brother and his friends trickled off into their rooms, and it was just me and one of the girls on my trip, as the other one had went into one of the boys' rooms. We were right at our room when we encountered the men again. At first we didn't notice anything wrong. They were probably just trying to find their room. I turned away from them and tried to find my room key and my wallet. Now at this point, my immature brain didn't notice anything wrong, but my roommate did. I could see the panic in her eyes, and as I turned to look at the men, I realized they weren't looking for a room. They were looking for us. My heart began to race, and we panicked, each fumbling for our own room cards to get into our rooms as quickly as possible. But they were moving towards us too quickly. We were standing there pressed against our door, as these two men stepped closer to us and got within half a foot of our faces. Their English wasn't the best, so they slowly asked what we were doing. I couldn't speak. I didn't know what to do in this situation, so my roommate spoke up. She tried her best to not let them know that this was our room, but it was obvious at this point. She stuttered something about trying to get into her friend's room, but these men clearly weren't there to know what we were doing. I could tell they were there for something far more sinister. One of the men continued to stare at me and eye me up and down, while the other got really close to my roommate and asked for her number. She stood up taller and quickly said, "No, I'm sorry, you can't." but her voice trailed off as her confidence wore off. At last I spoke, explaining to them that we were underage, and that we were on a school trip, and that we couldn't. They didn't take no for an answer. At that point, I slowly started to pull my room key from my wallet. Luckily, my friend pushed the card back into my wallet and made me push my hand holding my wallet behind my back. At that time, I was confused why she didn't let me in to go into our room, but now I realized she had more intuition about these men than I did. She knew that if we opened our room door with them right there, they'd likely force themselves in there with us, and who knows what would happen. Eventually, they backed off enough where we felt we could escape from them. She grabbed my wrist and pulled me along the hallway as we sprinted towards the elevator. Along the way, we ran into my brother and one of his friends. We quickly explained to them what happened, and they sprinted with us to the elevators. Once we were there, quickly pressing the elevator buttons to get downstairs to where our chaperones were, and we encountered the men again. I clutched onto my brother's arms, and my roommate did the same with my brother's friend's arm. They just stood on the other side of the hallway staring at us and quickly walking towards us. It looked like they were pretending to be just normal hotel patrons in front of the boys, but we knew that they weren't just normal patrons. They were creepy, and we weren't risking it. Finally, the elevator door opened, and I didn't think I've ever pressed the closed door button so fast. Right as the men got there, the doors closed. We thought our ordeal was over, but it wasn't. There were multiple elevators in the hotel. My brother, his friend, my roommate, and me had just gotten to the breakfast hall where most of our group/chaperones were when we realized the men were there too. They had followed us. They started off staying across the room from us, but were getting closer. We left the room and went back up to our rooms. Once there, my roommate and I were panicking. They knew where our room was. They knew our floor. They could find us at any time, and we didn't know what they could do. Our panic was cut short when the phone rang in our room. At this hotel, you could call other people's rooms, and we thought it was one of the boys playing a joke. We were wrong. When we picked up the phone, it was just heavy breathing and quiet laughing. We hung up after about 20 seconds. I called my brother and his friends and asked them to meet us outside our room. They walked us to the elevators and back down the stairs. On the way, we told them about the phone call. My brother's friend took responsibility for it. My roommate believed him, but I didn't. I knew they wouldn't freak us out like that. They were just trying to calm us down. Once downstairs again, still shaking, we told one of our chaperones about the two men, and they freaked out. We told the front desk about the men, but since they didn't know which room they were in, or their names, they told us they couldn't do anything. They tried to reassure us that there was a group staying there, and that they were probably a part of it, and that they were probably leaving in a few days, but that didn't calm us down. But thankfully, we never did see them again. This happened about a year ago. At the end of my first year at uni, they arranged a trip to this beach/cliff place as a drawing day as I study fine art. Me and my friend walked over to the cliff to go through these castle garden things, and we ended up on the beach on the other side of the cliff. We passed some of the tutors, so we knew we weren't too far away from where we had to meet on the bus. We decided to walk around the edge of this cliff. To get to the beach, we needed to meet the bus. We basically were climbing these giant rocks. When we got halfway, we realized we had to start making a move, as the tide was coming in, and we would be stranded. Some guy whose voice sounded exactly like our tutor said, "Hey girls, what's the time?" We look up expecting our tutor to be stood there, and there was this naked man stood on the cliff edge, fully naked, hands on hips. We looked at each other wide-eyed, completely confused and baffled as to what to say. He asks us the time again, so I told him. He stood there and watched us, and climbed away. When we made it back to the beach, just in time, as the tide had just met our feet as we climbed down, we told our tutor about the naked man. A bunch of the other people there had also seen him. It was very unpleasant. I am a 15-year-old straight male. I live in Germany, but come from a smaller European country. This event happened before my move to Germany. In my country, we have field trips, usually at the end of 8th grade, that last a week or so. Now, I've had my fair share of stalker encounters, but nothing like this. It was September 2014. I went to a field trip on an island with my class. I was 14 at the time, and there was this girl, Jane. Jane used to be a normal girl up until that point. She was always kind of shy and really kept to herself, but everyone liked her. She was never bullied or anything, just a regular shy girl. We used to chat on Facebook a little bit, but nothing serious. I never really harbored any feelings towards her, neither in her favor nor against her. So back to the field trip. I've smoked a couple of cigarettes with my mates in our hotel room, and then we went outside. The teacher wanted to show us some plants that were specific for the area. Now, I noticed that Jane was talking to me more and more often than before, and that she'd been walking very near me. But I thought that was merely a coincidence. I didn't make a fuss about it. But as time went by, the things had started to get worse. She started touching me, hugging me, and following me. On the third day, we went on a cruise to a nearby island, and during the cruise, she was sitting next to me. She had a camera and was taking pictures of me. I've had zero sense of restraint at that point, since I was young and didn't think much about it. I noticed that she was taking a suspicious amount of pictures of mostly me, and I told her to calm down. Then, she spoke to me for about an hour, but didn't say anything of interest. She was mimicking the Irish and British accents to me, and basically blabbering stuff for approximately an hour. I was just smiling and replying with, "That's nice." During the following days, she had began hugging me, and began making me feel even more uncomfortable. So one day, I came to her and told her that we needed to talk in private. We went to the woods, and I asked her if she liked me. She denied it, and kept saying that there had been a misunderstanding, but I knew that there was something off about her. Then she told me her life story. She said that her mother is a schizophrenic, and that she's severely depressed about it. I felt sorry for her, but I still told her that the touching was inappropriate. During my conversation, my friends wondered where I was and organized a search party. They found us and we got going, but she, for whatever reason, decided to stick around. There was one occasion where she came into our hotel room asking for water, as if there wasn't any in her own. However, when she got the requested water, she refused to leave the room. We got rid of her by telling her that we were going out to have some fun. The next day, things escalated. She would follow me around and hug me again. The peak of her abnormal behavior happened in the evening. I took a walk with a friend of mine and turned around briefly to see her behind us. She was following us. I kid you not, I've never felt this kind of dread in my entire life. My friend commented that we should go inside and let the police know I had a stalker as a joke. But anyway, she couldn't find us and gave up. My best friend heard the story and went to her to tell her to piss off, I wasn't very happy with him because I didn't expect him to be rude to her, regardless of her actions. I'm usually not meek, but I thought that was horrible. Now I see that no matter how cruel it was the right thing to do. I went to her room and apologized for my friend's actions. She was in her bed sobbing uncontrollably. I calmed her down and went outside. A female friend of mine, Sarah, had invited me to come into her room so that we could discuss something. I made my way to her room and saw 2 other girls there. We sat on the chairs in the balcony, and she had told me that Jane is very depressed and had done some self-harming in the past. Amidst our conversation, I winced. I looked up and saw Jane about 50 meters away, just sitting on a rock listening to music, staring at me. She had a solemn look in her eyes. I suddenly felt dismay and told my friends that we have a spectator. They winced too, and we decided to pry on her a little bit before backing into the bedroom. Just stay away from her, was the last thing Sarah told me before I left. To my luck, it was the last day of our field trip, and I finally got some rest. The weird encounters with her became less and less because she was often absent from school. Later I found out that she had overdosed on sleeping pills a couple of times, but survived all of them. There was even a rumor that she had ended up in a psychiatric institution, but I have no proof of that, so I'm not entirely sure if it's right. Anyway, the point of this story is you can be rude to someone to prevent something like this happening to you. It may seem cruel or might even hurt the other person, but in the end it's your life, and you have to stand up for yourself and make sure that you are happy. I went on a school trip to Greece my senior year of high school, along with about 7 other students and 2 of my teachers. I was the only senior, and there were a couple of juniors, and the rest were underclassmen, and the teachers were both in the early 30s. As I went to a very liberal/small private school, we didn't really have much of a game plan. We just decided to play it by ear, explore the culture, see the sights, and eat food. We stayed 5 nights in Athens before taking a weekend trip to Delphi, and on the 4th night, we walked to a small restaurant about 20 minutes away from our hotel. After dinner, it was pretty late. In many European countries, it's normal to eat late and spend a lot of time eating, so it may have been around 10:30 to 11 by the time we were there, and there was still a decent amount of people out as we walked through the central square of the area. I stopped to pick a song on my iPod and fell a little behind our group, and noticed a guy running across the square and stopping just short of the last guy there, and continued to follow him at about a 2-foot distance. I subtly told one of the teachers that I thought we may be being followed, and he glanced around and noticed the guy and told us to walk faster. This guy sped up as well, and before we knew it, we were at a full sprint, racing across streets and in front of cars, being chased by a man we didn't know. We ran for about 5 minutes before getting back to the hotel, and the man followed us inside the lobby before being ambushed by the manager, who quickly took him inside and had a conversation with him in Greek. We were told the man was a Romanian and spoke poor Greek and no English, and that he had been vague on his reasoning for chasing us. In my opinion, it was the hotel manager who was vague. I was more terrified and less assured after speaking to him, and we left for Delphi the next day. Let me set the scene. A small shop in Paris, and I'm on a school trip to France with other pupils. Now, I have always been on the tall side, so I may have looked older than I was, but at the time I was 12, but I looked at most 14. We were looking around and see this 30 to 40-year-old shopkeeper staring at me. Not so much staring, but leering. Then he starts saying to me, "Bisous, bisous." Now I didn't know much French, and none of the people I were with knew what it meant. Everyone felt uncomfortable, so we left. We later asked our French teacher what it meant, and we found out the creepy guy had been asking for a kiss. What a creep. I was 12 years old. When I was about 7 years old, I was a member of a scouting movement. I didn't really enjoy it, to be honest, since I was never really a sociable kid. But my parents figured that if I tried it for a while, I might make some friends and have some fun. I don't exactly remember everything of what I did there, but I have a vague memory of myself playing with friends on Sunday afternoons. One memory has stayed vivid throughout the years, though. As usual, it was a Sunday afternoon. It was a snowy mid-December day, and I and the rest of the kids were playing a game of tag with our supervisors outside the building. Let me situate the area a bit. The building was at the end of a road that led to a village. The building itself was surrounded by potato fields, and there was a small but lush forest on top of a hill behind the building. Like I said, it was cold, and everything was covered in a thick layer of snow. You also couldn't see more than about 100 feet ahead of you, because there was a fog that accompanied the snowfall. I honestly don't understand why they didn't keep us inside and let us play there. So the game of tag started, and a group of friends and I ran towards the back of the building. Most of the kids were in the front of the building, and there was a higher chance of getting tagged there. So we figured we'd go to the back to increase our survival chances, even when the supervisors didn't allow us to go there. The group consisted of 3 other kids, the ones I had most contact with. When we all arrived at the back of the building, we quietly stood behind the wall so that supervisor nor kid alike could know that we were there. I recall closing my eyes and faintly hearing the kids screaming in the background. The building was pretty long, so I figured we must have been around 82 feet away from the rest. While one of my friends was checking to see if no one was coming our way, I was talking to the other 2 of the group. However, we weren't talking for long, as quickly after that, we heard the sound of a branch snapping coming from the small woods in front of us. Between us and the woods was about 32 feet of grassland covered in snow, and we were still little kids, so we were expecting some wild animal to run towards us. But one of the kids brushed it off and told us to focus on the game. When I looked back at the tree line about 10 seconds later, there was a man next to one of the thin birch trees with his left hand placed on the tree. I remember that the man was wearing a black coat and a pair of jeans. He was bald, and it was hard to make out his facial features. At first I screamed, and the other kids asked me what was wrong. I pointed my finger at the man that was standing next to the tree. They all screamed too, but our screams must not have been loud, because no supervisor came rushing towards us. The man kept standing at the tree, not moving an inch. One of the kids stated that we should hurry back to the rest of the group as fast as possible. My heart was racing, and I could barely move. Just like in one of those dreams in which you want to run away from something, but you can't. As I kept staring at the man, it looked as if skin had grown over his eyes, and his mouth looked wider. Wider than what is considered normal. Then out of bloody nowhere, the man slowly starts walking towards us. I remember that I somehow had the courage to scream at it. It didn't say anything back. We certainly didn't want to wait for the man to reach us either. so we ran to the front of the building where the rest of the group was. Once we reached the rest of the kids, one of the kids in the group ran inside to the senior supervisor. I turned around to look at it again, but when I did, the man was gone. All I saw was the tree line and our footsteps in the snow. Sometime later, 3 supervisors, including the senior supervisor, went to look behind the building. They came back saying they didn't see anything, and that it was all right. We got a warning because we cheated, and they told our parents about the incident. Ever since, I think about it once in a while, and I wonder who or what it was, and what would have happened if I'd have stayed there frozen in fear in the snow behind the building. After the incident, I think it's no surprise that I quit the Scout movement. This happened 3 years ago. Back when I was in 9th grade, 14 years old at the time, me and several classmates were on a school trip to a nearby city, which was a 5-hour trip from home. We were accompanied by 2 teachers from our school, and we were going to stay there for 3 nights, specifically in a hotel. Our purpose for going there was to attend a regional invention contest and exhibition, which was only held once every 2 years. Our hotel wasn't a very big one. It only had 2 floors. Right next to the hotel was a 7-Eleven, which is a convenience store, and a short walk from there is the school where the exhibition is held. As the total kids that we were restless in that city, especially the 7-Eleven, which we didn't have back in our small town. We would often hang out there on our free time, and the fact that it was open 24 hours meant we could go whenever we wanted. One night, me and 2 close friends of mine and 4 other classmates decided to have a midnight snack at that very same 7-Eleven. It was around 10 p.m, and most of the stores in the city had already closed. There were very few people walking around, and we were probably the only kids walking around at that time. Our teachers warned us about going out late at night, but I guess we were too stubborn to listen. The 7-Eleven was empty, aside from one small man, probably in his 20s, who was manning the cash register. We each brought a small snack for ourselves and had a chat with each other for a few minutes. The street outside was still empty, and so was the store. While I was looking through the sweets and chocolate aisle, I overheard a masculine voice near the tables where my classmates were sitting. I went over and saw a different man, between the ages of 30 to 40, talking to 2 of my female classmates and another male classmate in the same table. He was fairly large, wore a green t-shirt and khaki pants. He also had a tattoo on his right arm, but unfortunately, I couldn't remember what the tattoo looked like. He introduced himself as Bob Leo, I'm pretty sure that was made up, and told my classmates that he was a musician, and tried to sing a few lyrics from the Bob Marley song, No Woman, No Cry, which was clearly off tune. I stood behind one aisle, occasionally glancing over and quietly listening to their conversation. My classmates tried to talk back, but the sound of their voice hinted that they were feeling uncomfortable. Meanwhile, my male classmates stood close by. Some of them tried to talk to Bob Leo in order to give my classmates time to slip past him. By then, I was already holding my phone, getting ready to call our teachers, but then Bob Leo called out to me and my friends, asking us to take as many soft serve ice creams as we wanted from the store, as we were getting treated by his friends, pointing outside to the 2 other men sitting outside the store staring at us. We slowly went over to the cashier, and he handed us 3 ice creams. As he handed me the last ice cream, he whispered to me, telling me to leave immediately, along with my classmates, as he will try and distract them. I gave the ice creams to my other classmates, and I looked over and saw one of my friends talking to the men outside. Apparently, he was the closest to the exit, and when he tried to leave, he was stopped by the 2 men. I couldn't hear what they were talking about at the time, and I told my other classmates what the cashier had told me, and he told the rest. While Bob was still talking, one of my male classmates went over to the female one and invited her to leave, acting like her boyfriend. Another did the same to my other female classmate. I opened my phone and acted like I'd received a text message from our teacher, telling us to return to our hotel room. Bob tried to stall us, this time more assertive, but we were already on our way out. As I walked out, I grabbed my friend by the shoulder and told him we were leaving. The 2 men also tried stopping us, grabbing my friend by the hand, but he slid past. They said that they were teachers of the school that we were attending the exhibition at, but when I asked about the event, they couldn't answer. As we were walking down the path, one of them yelled something in their native tongue, which translates to in English, "Damn, we almost got them." We left in a hurry, with my female classmates shaking. When we got back, the girls started sobbing, and we talked to them about it. I asked my friends what he and the 2 men were talking about, but he told me it was just nonsense and lies. We told our teachers what happened, and they spoke to the police about it. The next day, we weren't allowed to leave at night anymore. We never got to thank the cashier before we went home, but we left him a small token of our appreciation. As for Bob Leo and his creepy friends, let's not meet. I was with a group, staying about 2 to 3 days in Lake Havasu, a Native American reservation just adjacent to the Grand Canyon. For those who aren't familiar, this place is pretty funky and strange and a pretty hot tourist destination. A few years ago, a female Japanese tourist was found murdered somewhere on the reservation, and I think it turned out to be a local who had killed her. Anyway, my story isn't as horrific as that. You hike about 8 miles from the top of the canyon down switchbacks and onto a dirt trail right down the center of a bone-dry gorge. Some people ride horses into the reservations. There's literally no sign of civilization anywhere until you round a corner and there's clearly a relatively large town with houses and some minimal electricity, a police station and even a convenience store. Emaciated horses could be seen in many of the backyards, and you got that uneasy feeling every time the locals looked at you. The people seem pretty aloof though. Just on the other side of the town, further down the gorge, you get to the top of Havasu Falls, which is where the campground starts and where the tourists stay. A much more familiar scene for campers than the town in the middle of the gorge with no paved roads. The falls are beautiful, with water stained blue from natural limestone and minerals in the nearby rock. The blue water runs through all the campsites, and people play in it under the falls. My group settled in for the evening. We were young kids with 2 adult chaperones. We were pretty naive, and thinking back, I imagine the chaperones were probably severely traumatized, being responsible for the well-being of the group. We fixed dinner and sat around eating some backcountry brownies and chatting, enjoying the scenery. Eventually it got dark, and we started telling ghost stories about scary things, like people who want to wash your windows, because it sounded like Dracula or something. I don't know, I was a kid. One of the girls then started telling her story. She had the flashlight eerily lighting her face from below. We're all sitting in the dark around her. She hadn't been talking for more than a few minutes when a boy in the circle turned his light on abruptly and said, "Someone's there." He shined his light on an empty space besides the storyteller, and sure enough there was a man, probably in his 20s to 30s, with long white hair, sitting cross-legged. No one heard him show up, and he sat there in silence. The girl recoiled, and the chaperones clearly felt caught off guard, but the older woman looking after us spoke up and said, "Excuse me, sir, what are you doing here?" The man hesitated a while. "I'm just listening to ghost stories," she replied. "Well, this is our campsite, and we were hoping to have some privacy to spend time together." "So, you want me to leave?" "Yes, please. Thank you." The man slowly stands up. He's big, really tall. He has a headlamp that he doesn't turn on, and he literally walks into the brush and vegetation. We listen as he crashes through it. So now everyone is thoroughly freaked out, and the chaperones are discussing the next actions for the group, and we decide to stay on high alert and chill there for a minute longer to see if he would really leave us alone. Maybe it was just a misunderstanding. So we're sitting there, and we start hearing this thunderous crashing throughout the brush, all around us in the pitch black. A few kids with lights start shining them into the darkness, and periodically, this man will be standing motionless on the edge of some bushes before turning around and plunging into darkness again. He doesn't look angry, but he doesn't look friendly. At some point, he starts making this whooping sound, and that's when we decide it's time to get help. Conveniently, our chaperones actually had friends at another campsite where we retreated to for the evening. In the morning, we go back to our site. Everything is much less scary in the daylight, and our tormentor is sitting on the bench at the campsite just down the river from us. He's got a camelback on, and he appears mostly to be looking down. Occasionally he looks up as we toast bagels in pans and boil water for oatmeal. We are instructed to ignore him as best we can. After all, we have a fun day under the falls to look forward to. As we get our swimming gear set up, we stand up, and so does the man. Our female chaperone was the only one left at this point, because someone had gotten bit by something in the rush to get to the next campsite the prior night. As we walk, our chaperone tells us to walk faster and faster, to where we're almost running. As we come up to some other campsites with more people, she decides that this is the moment for confrontation. She turns around a whole 180 degrees and is face to face with this guy, and she just lays into him, shouting at him about how he's watching kids, what the hell he's trying to do, and what's wrong with him, and for him to stay the hell away from us. This man is still staring down, clearly kind of shocked, but now other people are getting involved, and he's not being violent with her. She tells us to head up to the waterfalls and wait for her. She was only about 10 to 15 minutes behind us. The man showed up 45 minutes later, frolicking in the water with a big old smile on his face, on his camelback. He looked like a kid in a weird way. I almost didn't recognize him. He paid us no attention. When we asked our leader what had happened, she said they took the man, who we now know as Lee, back to his campsite where his dad was. Apparently they were on some father-son trip, but he knew that something weird had happened to his son at Lake Havasu with his old girlfriend. For some reason, Lee confused our chaperone with his ex-girlfriend and thought she was doing God only knows what, but clearly something he disapproved of. There was more to this story about the girlfriend running off with Lee's best friend. Mostly it seemed clear to the rest of us that Lee had some mental health issues that needed to be addressed. So about 1 to 1.5 years ago, I went on a school trip to New York. We tried to minimize every cost, so we stayed in hostels, but they were pretty nice to be fair. One day we came back and were huddled around the courtyard kind of section in front to get a debrief for the following day. There were us 30 kids and 3 teachers. The lead teacher was stood on the bench as she addressed us. This tall, skinny man was walking past and joined the back of our group. A few of the boys noticed and pointed it out. We had gotten a few questions from people on the trip about who we were, so we didn't find it that weird at first. The man that saw the teacher staring blurted out, "You're so beautiful." She was flattered but a little confused. He remained there as if he had joined us. It was super weird, and he kept complimenting her. As we filed into the lobby, he followed. One teacher flagged one of the staff, and he kindly stepped in. "Sir, which room are you in?" 3. "Which floor, which section?" "I lost my key." He runs past him and continues to follow our group as we were heading down to the basement to use the kitchen, so it was definitely not a coincidence. He ended up getting politely escorted away, but kept coming back. Our teacher told us to go into our rooms, and I don't know what happened after, but his persistence was very creepy. This story happened on my 8th grade school trip to Philadelphia. We were there for a tour of history, and we were all staying in a Hilton. I believe it was in downtown. On one of the days after getting back from the Liberty Bell, we went to a 7-Eleven nearby to have lunch. All 10 of us were crammed into this store, but the way the shelves were laid out made it so that it was indeed possible to get separated. I was at the counter getting a slice of pizza when a guy who looks to be in his early 30s walks into the store. He sort of stands around while the counter guy is grabbing the pizza and waits. After the clerk gives me the pizza, the man who just came in approaches me. He asks me for a favor, waves a $20 bill in my face and tells me to come outside to meet him for said favor. Keep in mind I'm only 12 at the time. I stand there frozen to the ground, not knowing what the hell to say to this guy. Luckily, my teacher, who was 6.5 feet tall, walks over to us and tells the guy that he's my teacher, and if the guy needs anything, he should ask him. I guess the guy was intimidated enough that he said, "Oh, okay," and walks out the store. While I wasn't intending to go outside with the guy, who knows what could have happened if I did. I don't want to go to Philly again until I'm an adult now. Hey guys, it's Mort here, and thank you so much for listening. I hope that you enjoyed tonight's field trip horror stories. It's a new topic I've never done before, and I'd love your feedback, so don't forget to leave it in the comments section with your thoughts. If you enjoyed it, drop a like, and if you're new here, why not subscribe, and press the bell icon to be notified of new content every night. If there's a story that you would like to share, feel free to send it to my Reddit or my email, which you can find in the description. In other news, my brother's channel is doing exceptionally well. He's already picked up nearly 2,000 subscribers in a week, which is absolute madness. So thank you to everyone who's gone over to check him out. If you haven't already, well, there's clearly hype, so I'd go over there and check it out and be one of the first to see his channel. It's really cool. He talks about people that have been forgotten through history, who've led really extraordinary lives or done cool things. I'd suggest you check him out, but maybe I'm biased. But perhaps 2,000 people aren't. I'm going to leave a link at the end and in the description for you to click on it. But anyway, with that being said, it's time for me to sign off. Stay awesome, click the link, and I'll see you in the next one.